Have you here, Madam Secretary. Before we begin formally, I want to recognize Ms. Roy Ball Allard for the purposes of an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the courtesy. I would like to introduce Tommy Diaz, who's a former foster care youth who is shadowing me today for the 6th Annual Congressional Foster Youth Shadow Day. Tommy is a resident of Downey, California, in my 40th Congressional District. His educational aspirations are to earn a master's in architecture and have a career in designing sustainable student housing. I just want to thank him for coming to D.C. to help ensure that the voices of current and former foster care youth are involved in child welfare reform discussion, particularly efforts to support the well-being, talent, and educational aspirations of every child involved in foster care. And Tommy's the one with the blue around him.
Why don't you stand up real quick? Yeah, stand up. There he is. Good morning, Madam Secretary. It's genuinely my pleasure to welcome you here to the Subcommittee on Labor, Health and Human Services and Education. We're looking forward to hearing your testimony. Madam Secretary, you have one of the most important jobs in Washington, and that's ensuring that all young people will have access to the education they need to be successful in coming decades. And frankly, I know it's a cause that you've devoted your life to quite selflessly. Many of our schools do fantastic jobs. Some need some support, and others are in need of significant improvement and reform. But one fact remains, and that's we need to do the right thing for all America's children, and your job is to ensure that that happens. The budget blueprint that came out in March was further detailed yesterday and proposes some dramatic shifts in the way your agency does business. It has a goal of opening doors for more educational choices to families, whether those schools be regular public schools, charter schools, or private schools. I applaud your investment in high-quality charter schools as a way to give options to many students who have had no options in the past. I support high-quality education options for all students, and I believe the neediest among us have the most to gain from an excellent education. I've long supported programs that help level the playing field for Indian children, for disabled children, first-generation college students, and poor children. I think that's a common objective on this committee. Today, I'll have some questions about how your school choice proposals would work and how they would mesh with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that was just completed over a year ago and was nearly a decade in the making. I also appreciate that your budget aims to protect the most vulnerable populations, students with disabilities, English language learners, and minority-serving institutions. It's unfortunate that the timing of the final consolidated appropriations bill and the production of the full budget coincided such that the final fiscal 2017 year budget figures were not known at the time your funding proposal decisions were finalized. And I understand that makes makes sometimes cuts appear that frankly were not intended to be cuts at all. In many cases, it's obvious that the policy of your administration was to maintain current funding for programs, but Congress increased funding after for particular programs sometimes after the fact, such that your proposal would appear to be a cut when in fact that was not the intention at all. We simply need to carefully explain ourselves when discussing proposed increases and decreases today. Your budget also shifts the way higher education student financial assistance flows by proposing dramatic changes in SEOG and college work-study programs. I look forward to learning more about how you believe these reforms will increase student access to and completion of college programs. Your budget consolidates and proposes over 20 programs for elimination. Many of these are cited as being duplicate, ineffective, or not a key federal mission. I look forward to discussing those. And your budget also proposes cuts in TRIO and Gear Up, which frankly I will advise you I have a different point of view on. But I'll be interested in discussing this with you and learning your rationale. I'll also have questions about your proposed funding levels for individuals with disabilities, particularly in light of the recent Supreme Court decision, which found that schools must provide a meaningful education opportunity to all children with disabilities and not just a bare minimum level of services. And again, I want to commend you for making a special effort to protect these populations in your budget. Finally, ultimately, this subcommittee needs to know the specific details of how your cuts impact schools and students, and how new programs would be implemented. The budget provides some of these details, and I know some are still being developed, but we look forward to hearing what you're able to share with us today. As a reminder to the subcommittee and our witnesses, we'll abide by the 5-minute rule so that everyone will have a chance to get their questions asked and answered. Obviously, we have both the big chairman and the ranking member here, so I'm going to move next to my ranking member, but we'll certainly be calling for them for whatever remarks they care to make as well.
Thank you very much.
Gentlelady from Connecticut.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to welcome the Secretary. I will take 1 second, if I will, because like my colleague, Congresswoman Roybal Allard, I too have a young woman who's shadowing me today, Justina Rosario, from the city of New Haven, Connecticut, who, as with Tom, is part of the program is dealing with foster children and making it through the system, which they both have. So I want to welcome her. Thank you, Justina. Again, thank you, Secretary DeVos, for joining us today, and offer my congratulations to you. But let me launch right in, as we spoke about recently. I believe the proposals contained in President Trump's budget are alarming, and quite frankly, this puts us on a path towards the privatization of public education. This budget intends to shift public school funding and to advance an agenda that transfers taxpayer dollars out of local community schools. Education is the great equalizer in our country. At the signing of the ceremony for the original Elementary and Secondary Education Act, President Lyndon Johnson described education as, quote, the only valid passport out of poverty. Decades later, he's still right. The economic benefits that accrue to the individual and society are indisputable. That's why our government must be committed to providing every child with access to high-quality public education. We need to focus policies on strengthening public schools, reducing class sizes, supporting the teaching profession, providing more one-on-one attention, boosting student enrichment opportunities, supporting parental involvement, and making high-quality preschool available to all. We have an achievement gap in this country, and it is worse in high-poverty areas, both urban and rural. Yet these are the very areas we would starve with this budget. I note that a concerted federal investment has helped students of color and low-income students make gains since the Department of Education was created. NAEP reading and math scores have improved. I won't go into it now, but later in the hearing, to read you the success percentages of our students with the NAEP scores. At the same time, economic inequities grew. High-poverty districts receive less funding. Their students are more likely to be taught by novice teachers and less likely to take an AP course for which they have shown potential. 90% of our kids are in public schools. We need more resources to help them succeed. You can't do more with less. You do less with less. And we certainly should not be siphoning off taxpayer dollars to pay for vouchers. Vouchers, in my view, will destabilize not only our schools, but our communities. And I will fight at every step against any attempt to take public money away from public schools. Cutting funding for critical programs to increase federal investments in charter schools also raises public accountability questions. I support charter schools, but I do not believe that they should supplant a public education system. Transferring limited resources from public schools to private schools is wrong. It creates a false choice for families. When Congress completed the bipartisan reauthorization of the elementary and secondary education in 2015, it soundly rejected efforts to decimate neighborhood schools, and we expect the administration to implement the new law as written. The Trump budget request includes $1.4 billion in new funding to expand so-called choice. At the same time, the budget puts $9.2 billion in cuts on the table, slashing or eliminating funding for many programs that benefit kids in public schools to pay for this ill-conceived proposal. Despite budget documents and rhetoric claiming the request maintains funding for core formula grant programs. It cuts $578 million from Title I and $114 million from IDEA. The budget also eliminates $1.2 billion for after-school enrichment programs that help keep nearly 2 million kids safe. $2 billion for teacher professional development and class size reduction, which would result in more than 7,000 teachers losing their jobs. Literacy is a mark of a civilized society. We spend money to spread literacy internationally, yet we are eliminating $190 million from the largest reading program for low-income children and youth and $96 million from grants that help low-skilled adults become literate. Despite promises by the administration to champion the American worker, the budget slashes funding by 15% for career and technical education programs that help prepare high school and community college students for in-demand jobs. The list goes on and on. The budget also proposes deep cuts to or eliminations of programs that help students access and succeed in higher education that have enjoyed bipartisan support on this subcommittee for many years. 15% cut to TRIO, which would end academic support services for more than 130,000 college students. 50% cut to work study, which would punish thousands of students who are working their way through college. The complete elimination of both the SEOG, Supplemental Education Opportunity Grants, that 1.5 million students rely on, grants that allow schools to tailor programs to students' needs, and the Strengthening Institutions program that helps nearly 200 community colleges and other institutions serve working-class students. The budget calls for an end to public service loan forgiveness for police officers, teachers, nurses, and raids $4 billion from Pell, without taking any steps to help students access the economic freedom they deserve, such as increasing the maximum Pell Award. Those in the administration claim to support historically black colleges and universities, but refuse to admit or simply ignore the fact that these disastrous budget proposals would harm the very programs that HBCUs and their students rely on. I want to be clear. Fraught and painful history of segregation in this country. HBCUs were not the product of school choice. They were a product of our nation's racist segregation. Aside from your budget, I have questions about how you plan to protect students from low-quality, high-debt for-profit colleges. These companies prey on low-income students, students of color, and the honorable men and women who serve in our military and sacrifice their lives for this country. Students at for-profits represent only about 1 in 10 of the total higher education population, yet they represent more than a third of all federal student loan defaults, calling into question the quality and the value of education provided by this sector. The borrower defense and gainful employment regulations are critically important steps in reining in these abuses. That's why I am alarmed that one of your first actions as Secretary was to delay the gainful employment rule. Failure to fully implement this regulation will not only hurt students, it would be expensive. The Congressional Budget Office estimated a $1.3 billion cost over 10 years to taxpayers. President George H.W. Bush once said, and I quote, "Think of every problem, every challenge we face. The solution to each starts with education," end quote. We owe it to the future of our society to make a commitment to all of our children that they get the best start in life as possible. And that cannot happen if we make misguided cuts to education. I look forward to a robust discussion today, and I thank you for being here. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentlelady, and we're very privileged to have the distinguished chairman of the full committee here today. So, Chairman, we would love to hear whatever opening remarks you care to make.
Well, thank you, Chairman Cole, and also want to welcome Madam Secretary DeVos here to the Appropriations Committee. We look forward to your testimony and hearing your frank and candid views on any number of issues. Today's hearing is an important part of the oversight duties of this committee. Now that we've formally received the administration's budget request, the committee will undertake a thorough analysis of each and every budget. We'll go through each and every budget line, question every witness, and demand credible spending justifications, and only then will we make our own determinations on the best use of those tax dollars. We intend to put forward a complete set of appropriations bills that adequately fund important programs while working to reduce, eliminate waste and duplication. I will work with Ms. Lowy, Chairman Cole, Ranking Member DeLauro to move rapidly in coming weeks and months to complete the fiscal year 2018 appropriations bills. Again, today's hearing is part of a process we follow to determine the best use of taxpayers' dollars. After all, the power of the purse lies in this building. It is the constitutional duty of Congress to make spending decisions on behalf of the people we represent at home. We owe it to our young people to ensure that they have access to the best education possible, and your department is vital in keeping that promise. Many programs administered by the Department of Education, like Pell Grants and those established by the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, ensure young people receive a quality education. I visit many wonderful schools in my district in New Jersey, some of the best in the nation, throughout the school year, and I hear from students, teachers, and parents on a range of issues. In middle schools and high schools, I often hear about the benefits of a well-rounded education supported by Every Student Succeeds Act, which allows students to pursue interests in the arts, music, and physical education, as well as STEM education and English. In colleges and universities in my district, many students remind me that they would not have the opportunity to attend without programs like Pell and Federal Work Study. I'm eager to hear how your department will ensure opportunity for these students under proposed reductions, including the elimination of the supplemental education opportunity grants. Further, these goals can only be met by ensuring the next generation of teachers have access to quality higher education and the necessary tools in their careers. We need to work as we have in the past in a bipartisan way to ensure that every child in America is well educated. In conclusion, Madam Chairman, I welcome you. I look forward to working with you and this committee to make sure that we have the best possible legislation possible. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, we're very fortunate to have the ranking member of the full committee, my good friend from New York, is recognized for whatever remarks she cares to make.
And I want to thank Chairman Cole. It's good to have Chairman Frelinghuysen here, my partner, and always good to have my friend, Congresswoman DeLauro, here. Thank you both for holding this hearing, and I am very pleased to welcome Secretary DeVos before this subcommittee for the first time. Madam Secretary, I will get right to it. I believe that your budget proposal would do great harm to students in every facet of education, from kindergarten through graduate school, and for those with student loan debt, years beyond. It is just another example of the broken promises in the Trump budget that would harm hard-working Americans and set us back in preparing a 21st century workforce. To me, this budget reflects the views that do not represent the majority of people in my district and people throughout the country. Your budget would cut $9.2 billion from the Department of Education, a cut of 13.6%, taking us back to 2002 levels. It would siphon money from public schools to pay for private school vouchers, eliminate more than 22 education investments, including teacher training, after-school programs, leaving 1.6 million children without a safe enrichment environment. And I want to say that has always been one of my favorite programs, because if you can't convince people that they're enriching their children, at least they're keeping them safe while their parents are both working. It would make higher education more expensive by cutting federal work study in half, eliminating Perkins loans for needy students, preventing inflationary increase for Pell Grants, robbing its surplus, ending public service loan forgiveness, and more. In my district, Rockland Community College is currently taking part in a Department of Education initiative that provides childcare for low-income parents taking college courses, allowing students to earn a degree and enter the workforce more quickly with less debt. Your budget would eliminate this program, destroying the dreams of these hardworking people who are trying to build a better life for themselves and their children. And I hope, by the way, before this budget is completed, you would come to the district, meet these families, meet these parents who are working jobs, going back to school so they can have a positive, bright future. This budget reflects the views of an administration filled with people who frankly never had to worry about how they were going to pay for their children going to college. And yet, I am most upset that this budget would undermine our public education system and the working families who depend on them by reallocating funding for disadvantaged students, including the Pell surplus and Title I funding to private school vouchers. Study after study shows these vouchers go to families who would likely send their kids to private school anyway, yet this budget would deplete public schools to fund them. It's clear to me that you do not have the necessary understanding of our education system between this proposed budget and your comments referring to public schools as a dead end and public school teachers as being in, quote, receive mode. Please come spend some time in schools in my district where the teachers I know don't stop working when the final bell rings. They work for hours every night getting prepared for the next day. Many of these teachers and administrators are on the front line identifying the best way to reach each student and at times being a parent, counselor, teacher, and more. And I'm not saying that it's all perfect, but let's improve the system rather than destroy the system. The teachers I represent were angered and demoralized after hearing your statements on public education. I hope that as you lead the department, you will see the hard work and good that most public school teachers do every day and do better than this budget proposal to empower them to succeed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. And Madam Secretary, again, it's a genuine pleasure to have you here. You're recognized for whatever opening remarks you care to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Frillinghausen, Ranking Member Lowy, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member DeLauro, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the administration's budget proposal for fiscal year 2018. I look forward to talking about how we can work together to improve educational opportunities and outcomes for all students, while also refocusing the federal role in education. While today's hearing is meant to focus on the numbers and mechanics of the budget, I hope we'll all remember our goal and our purpose, how to best serve America's students. Allow me to share just one example. I recently met a young man, Michael, whose story truly spoke to me. Michael grew up in East Hartford, Connecticut, in a low-income neighborhood. He was an average student throughout elementary and middle school, but all that changed when he reached the district high school. Michael described a school where students were the real ones in charge of the class, and they would make it impossible for the teacher to teach. He was constantly bullied to the point he was afraid to even go to the school's bathroom, and this constant fear made him hate school. He described the school he was assigned to as, and I quote, nothing more than adult daycare, a dangerous daycare. But even though he was failing his classes, the school simply passed him along from year to year, giving him D's and sending the not-so-subtle message that they didn't think Michael would amount to much. Michael got a diploma, but not an education. Michael followed the path he thought he was destined for, working in a low-skill, low-wage job. But with the encouragement of his wife, Michael took a course at the local community college to see what was possible for him. He found an environment that was invested in his success, and much to his surprise, Michael earned an A. He thought it was a fluke, so he took more classes. Lo and behold, he earned more A's. He's now in the school's honors program with the goal of working as an emergency room nurse. His success is America's success. Access to a quality education is the path to the American dream. So I ask you to keep Michael and countless other students like him in mind as we go about our shared work to support America's students. No student should feel they attend a dangerous daycare. No child's dream should be limited by the quality or lack thereof of the education they receive. This budget lays out a series of proposals and priorities working toward ensuring every student has an equal opportunity to receive a great education. It focuses on returning decision-making power and flexibility to the states where it belongs and giving parents more control over their child's education. Parents deserve that right, and frankly, that right has been denied for too long. We cannot allow any parent to feel their child is trapped in a school that isn't meeting his or her unique needs. The budget also reflects a series of tough choices. If taxpayer money were limitless, we wouldn't need a budget at all. But by its very definition, a budget reflects the difficult decisions of how best to appropriate the limited taxpayer dollars we have. This budget does so by putting an emphasis on the programs that are proven to help students, while taking a hard look at programs that are well-intended but simply haven't yielded meaningful results. This is why the President's fiscal year 2018 budget would reduce overall funding for department programs by $9 billion, or 13%. I've seen the headlines, and I understand those figures may sound alarming for some. However, this budget refocuses the department on supporting states and school districts in their efforts to provide high-quality education to all our students. At the same time, the budget simplifies funding for college while continuing to help make a higher education more accessible to all. I'd like to outline the principles that guided our decision-making. First, our request would devote significant resources toward giving every student an equal opportunity for a great education. It emphasizes giving parents more power and students more opportunities. Second, the administration's request recognizes the importance of maintaining strong support for public schools through long-standing state formula grant programs focused on meeting the educational needs of the nation's most vulnerable students, including poor and minority students and students with disabilities. Third, our request maintains funding for key competitive grant programs that support innovation and build evidence of what works in education. This also means strong support for the research and data collection activities of the department. Fourth, our request reduces the complexity of funding for college while prioritizing efforts to help make a college education accessible for low-income students. As Congress prepares to reauthorize the Higher Education Act, I look forward to working with you to address student debt and higher education costs while accelerating and improving student completion rates through such efforts as year-round Pell and reducing the complexity of student financial aid. And fifth, consistent with our commitment to improve the efficiency of the federal government, our request would eliminate or phase out 22 programs that are duplicative, ineffective, or are better supported through state, local, or philanthropic efforts. 6 additional programs were already eliminated in the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. All told, taxpayers will save $5.8 billion. In total, the President's budget fulfills his promise to devolve power from the federal government and place it in the hands of parents and families. It refocuses the department on supporting states in their efforts to provide a high-quality education to all of our students. Research shows that increasing education options can have positive effects on students generally, and an even greater impact on poor and minority students. If we truly want to provide better education to underserved communities, then we must start with giving parents and students the power to select high-quality schools that meet their needs. We want to unleash a new era of creativity and ingenuity in the education space. My hope is that, working in concert with each of you, we can make education in America the envy of the rest of the world. Thank you again for the opportunity to share the administration's vision for improving education across the country. I look forward to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and delighted again to have you here and appreciate your testimony. Let me begin with the first of the many unfair questions you're going to get. Unfair in this case because you will have had so little time in your department to react to it. But As I'm sure you're well aware, we recently had a Supreme Court decision, Andrew versus the Douglas County School District, an 8-0 decision which found that school districts must provide a truly meaningful level of educational opportunity for students with disabilities and not simply more than a de minimis level of basic services. I think it's early, obviously, to tell what the full ramifications and implications of this are, but as you know, this is a tremendous cost to local school districts. Obviously, it's a major item in your budget as well, which, again, I appreciate you defending. Have you had a chance to think about what the impact of this decision will be on local school districts and obviously, how the department might be able to assist local areas in addressing it?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. And this is an issue about which I've definitely become aware and followed closely. Let me just begin by saying how important I believe it is the federal departments, the federal government's role is to support the IDEA plan program, supporting students with special needs, with disabilities. And this budget does, in fact, anticipate fully funding IDEA. What the implications are of this decision obviously remain to be seen. We're looking closely at the decision and the directive to help provide guidelines and are in the process of working through that now. But I would come back to I think the original reason for the case, and that was that these parents felt their son was not getting the kind of education that he needed. And they, as any parent would do, fought hard to make sure that their child was getting the support that he needed. And I think that this is an area that is very ripe for a broader discussion around empowering parents more in these decisions around their children.
This has been an area that this committee has really focused on. As a matter of fact, with all due respect, the last administration, they flat funded IDEA in their last couple of budgets, and it was this committee, honestly, that put more money for IDEA than either the Senate or the House. So as you develop your strategies, it's an area that we're going to want to visit with you about again, because again, we know this is a challenge for a lot of districts, and obviously we want to make sure these young people are well taken care of. Let me also ask you and give you an opportunity, and in full disclosure, I'm a big TRIO fan. I've seen the impact in my district, and it's a program actually I first found a lot about when I was an academic back in the 1970s. It's been around a long time. It's a great society era program, but it's produced over 5 million college graduates, so it's served its purpose well. And again, that's an area that had been flat funded, and this subcommittee has been the leader on restoring funding there. So I know you've proposed some reductions to that and to gear up if you care to address it in the time that we've got. Would love to have your thinking on this and your assessment of the program.
Thank you. Agreed. There are portions of the TRIO program that have been very effective and very important for students who are aspiring to go to college who may not have had that opportunity. The focus of this budget and the portion of the TRIO program that we're proposing to be eliminated are the McNair and the EOC portions. McNair being focused on post-baccalaureate program students and not, sort of outside of the original intent of the TRIO programs to begin with. And then the EOC program being more of an ancillary activity to help support or market the TRIO program. So we felt that, again, with tough choices to be made, that these were areas that probably were not really focused on the original intent as Congress intended the TRIO programs originally. So we have proposed those be eliminated, but continue to fund the Upward Bound and the other talent search and the other student services support.
I appreciate that very much, and we'll continue to have a dialogue. I think you'll find if you look at McNair in particular, it's helped a lot of students get graduate school that otherwise couldn't, because again, they quite often are coming from families with very limited means. But
granted, it's just a high cost per student in
you're
terms
absolutely
of its
correct.
Application.
It is much more expensive per student, but that's partly because it's a graduate degree as opposed to an undergrad. But you're correct in your assessment and the cost. With that, let me go to my good friend, the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, you previously stated that funding designated for professional development in Title II, Part A of ESSA is redundant and duplicative. Eliminating Title II, Part A sends the message that either teachers, school staff, and principals have hit all the benchmarks and they do not need to improve, or teachers, school staff, and principals are doing so poorly that there is no need to invest in them. Which category do you believe teachers, paraprofessionals, and principals fall into?
Well, Madam Congresswoman, first of all, the Title IIA program, we believe has been spread very thinly. It's been more prescriptive in nature. And as the states go to implement their ESSA programs and plans, they have great latitude with how to use other funding sources and to devote them to the kinds of activities that 2A has been intended for. 20% of the grants that have gone through that program are of $10,000 or less. And so the efficacy of them has been very much in question. We believe that with the flexibility granted to the states, that they're going to be able to use the other funding streams to use in support of these developmental programs, if that's what's right for the plan and programs and the students in their states.
I don't know these days that states have a lot of leeway in other funding streams. I just point to the state of Connecticut, which is in very serious financial difficulty. You know, when teachers feel prepared and supported, they stay in the profession. Standards and curriculum change based on research. Teachers need to improve and change as well. Do you believe that that's true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
And
a
that they
good
need
and
the
effective teacher is invaluable.
And they need the resources to do it. Okay, so having the resources there is critically important in order to deal with teacher development. Many schools use their Title II Part A funds to keep classes from being overcrowded. So parents do not want their first grader to be in a class of 30 with one teacher. Eliminating this funding could mean firing approximately 8,000 teachers. How do you explain this decision to parents?
Well, again, we believe with the implementation of ESSA that states are going to be best equipped and best able, along with their local education agencies and authorities, to be able to make these decisions on behalf of students closer to the
Decisions,
decision.
though, without resources.
Well, there's resources through Title I that are very flexible in that regard.
Well, we've got a serious shift in funds from Title I. We can get that in another round. Shifting of the money out of Title I to school choice. That's part of where you all want to go with Title I. So Title I isn't going to be at the level that it necessarily needs to be in order to be able to accommodate these efforts. You talked about in your FY 2018 budget that it refocuses the department's mission on supporting the efforts of states to provide high-quality education. My view that eliminating Title II Part A contradicts this mission. How do you square this circle?
Again, we believe that these decisions are best made at the state and the local level, and their ability to target the resources to where the needs are for their state, for their students, and for their schools is the most important. The flexibility afforded through ESSA is a very important element in consideration of this whole budget process.
Should every student, again, you can't do less with less. That's my view. I don't know what everyone else's view is. And we're cutting back significantly in the resources to education and dealing with the notion that we do not have to invest in teacher training or in reduced class size in order to help better to have kids learn. Should every student have access to a highly qualified teacher? I'm sure your answer is
Absolutely. They should.
How does the eliminating Title II funding impact the belief? We know that the SEED exists, TIF exists. There are competitive grants that don't reach every state and every school district. So how do you, by eliminating Title II, how do you back up your view that every student should have access to a highly effective teacher?
Again, reprioritizing the dollars that go to the states for their flexibility to be used in the best manner that they deem the best manner possible for on behalf of the students they're serving. And just with respect to your question and comment about reducing class size, that portion of that program only was effective or implemented for 8,000 teachers out of more than 3 million. So the number of teachers that are actually being benefited or impacted through that is really very minimal.
8,000. I guess if you're one of those 8,000, you don't view
Indeed.
yourself as minimal. I just one final comment. And is there evidence that states and districts aren't spending all of their Title I money? Because you have claimed that they can
Lady,
use Title I.
please.
There's no room to accommodate elimination of these programs. Thank you for your courtesy, Mr. Chairman.
And please, if you'd care to respond.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you. And again, we'll try and be generous with the clock, but
Thank you.
please. Okay, if we can, we next go to the full chairman. Mr. Chairman?
Madam Secretary, I visit some years as many as 80 schools, juniors and seniors in high school, 7th and 8th graders, some of whom may trek down here for their Washington trip, and elementary schools, promoting obviously literacy, Read Across America, things that put a sort of a human face on what we do as members of Congress to support public education. I've had a particular focus, as has the Chairman Cole, on IDEA, and I am hugely impressed and actually in awe of anyone who teaches special ed. They should be named as for sainthood. We've never met our full obligation. I think the law was passed in 1975. 40% partnership. Could you talk a little bit about where you are relative to a greater participation in terms of that partnership? I think it's absolutely essential. And may I just say for the record, and maybe it's true of New York as well for Ms. Lowy, that there are a number of people who come to New Jersey because of court decisions which require a thorough and efficient education for every child, regardless of their circumstance. And many families with disabilities have children with severe disabilities, a whole spectrum of disabilities come to our state. We have obviously a great public school system. We have a supportive number of other schools maybe dealing with autism, particular challenges. Where do you feel we're going, and how supportive does this budget represent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share your concern and heart for both these students as well as those who help teach them, and they have a tremendous dedication to a wide range of needs and a wide range of students. And your reference to the fact that when IDEA was originally passed, the goal was to fund it to support 40% of the cost of it. If Congress were to actually fully fund it, it would be $30 billion for IDEA. The budget and what you have traditionally funded it the last number of years is at about the 15% range. So you can see we are proposing to continue the budget funding as has been done in the last number of years. But I think it's a matter for robust conversation. If Congress believes that the commitment to this program should be at a much higher level financially, there's certainly an opportunity there.
I think at one point, Mr. Chairman, we were up to 19%. I think maybe 22%, and now we're down to, I think, 17%. I think we need to do better, and I just want to put my oar in the water because I think it's very important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now go to the ranking member of the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've heard, I am extremely disappointed that your budget proposes to take funding from public education and transfer it to private schools. In my judgment, we need to increase the resources. Remember, the federal government just provides about 9% of resources for public schools. Most of it comes from state and local taxes. So what we have to do is increase resources for public schools, not put an increased burden on the state and local, and again, continue to work together to improve them, not diminish them. So I think it's imperative that this committee and the American people really understand just what this proposal would do. So a couple of quick questions you can just answer yes or no. Under your proposal, would a student with disabilities receiving a voucher for a private school have due process rights under IDEA?
Ranking Member Lowy, I thank you for the question, and thank you for being here today. Before responding yes or no to your question, allow me to just address one of the things that you said earlier about shifting funding. We're not proposing any shifting of funding from public schools to private schools. In fact, all of the proposals that have been set forth in the budget continue to fully fund and commit to funding public schools as we have. And so I want to make sure that we're very clear on that, and if we're misunderstanding numbers somehow, let's talk about that.
Aren't you talking about vouchers? Who's paying for the vouchers?
That is an additional program to the Title I funds that have been carried forward in the budget.
But where
The Title I funds in the budget are consistent from...
This is clearly a misunderstanding, so maybe at another time we could talk about that. If you're funding with vouchers, private school, the money is coming from someplace, and there's an overall cut in the budget.
There is a proposal for a $250 million investment in the innovation portion of the budget that would help fund some pilot test programs around school choice. And we talk about, everybody talks about vouchers, but what we also have to understand, there are many different mechanisms to provide parents choices, and vouchers are but one mechanism. The $250 million does not prescribe a method or a mechanism. That remains to be discussed and decided upon if that is funded as part of the appropriations process.
We'll have to continue this discussion, because I'd be interested in knowing whether private schools funded with public taxpayer dollars will be held to the same performance standards as public schools. And do you believe that private schools that enroll voucher students should be accredited and have to provide evidence of the quality of their programs?
Each state deals with this issue in their own manner, and I can refer to the program in Florida where there are 40,000 parents whose children are deemed students with disabilities who have chosen to take what's called a McKay Scholarship and take it to a private school of their choice. Those parents are very happy with and satisfied with that decision. They've made that choice to do that. And I refer to that as a specific example of a state addressing an issue in a way that's working for the students and parents in their state. Each state has to deal with this, I believe, in their own way.
Maybe I misunderstood, but can you clarify, a student with disabilities receiving a voucher for a private school have due process rights under IDEA? What is the law under that?
Due process rights with regard to IDEA. If a parent chooses to go to a school that is not a public school, then that is a decision made and a contract made with that private provider or that other provider.
But will they have access to IDEA? Will they have due process rights? Or is that, the public should know that it's optional, correct?
The way that they handle it in Florida is one approach, but again, each state has to, I believe, if they're going to offer choices to parents and to students, they're going to deal with those issues in the way that works best for their state.
Let me just say, I see I have no time left, but there are many questions I have: after school programs, Pell Grants. We've worked very, very hard on this committee to support public education all the way up, and I am very concerned when the the federal government only pays 9% of the budget, that you are supporting further cuts. So I think we need increased dialogue here, because education for me is probably one of our most important responsibilities if we're going to have a workforce that is strong, healthy. Thank you. Thank you.
Couldn't
Mr.
agree with you
Chairman.
more.
Certainly. We're going to go a little bit out of order, if we may, because our friend Ms. Herrera Butler has another engagement. So Mr. Harris has graciously agreed to allow us to go to her, and then we'll resume our normal rotation.
Very gracious. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the good doctor from Maryland. So I'll make it as succinct as I possibly can. In 2014, suicide was the second leading cause of death among young people 13 to 19. And youth suicide is a problem in certain areas of my district and across the country, quite frankly. And I've made a commitment to helping our schools address this problem. I have a kind of a two-part question, Madam Secretary. The first one is, how does the department plan on partnering with local school districts as well as other agencies to effectively and swiftly address the mental health crisis that we are seeing evolve in our nation's youth? And secondly, the second part, in many cases, school resource officers or SROs play an important role in this effort. They engage with students on a daily basis. They get to know them and are critical in identifying depression and suicidal behavior among these school-age kids or young people. And for the last few years, COPS hiring program has given additional resources or additional consideration to SRO grant applications, so the school districts can make application for this. And I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on the practice of school-based policing through school resource officers, and is it something you'll be supporting?
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. First, let me say I share your concern about this crisis in our youth, and I think to start with those issues and that crisis is best addressed at the most local level possible. Mm-hmm. And so to the extent that ESSA, again, allows states and local communities great flexibility in how to invest the resources, hopefully that they will, in a area where that is a very specific issue and crisis, they will certainly devote the resources necessary. From the department level, we do have a program, the Office of Safe and Healthy Students, that is involved with helping to meet some of these needs. But again, it's very much a very distant relationship there. And I think to the extent that local communities have this issue as very high on their radar screen, I hope and trust that states in implementing their plans will account for that and address those needs very specifically there.
Do you think the Department of Justice should continue to promote the hiring of school resource officers within the COPS program?
I'm sorry, could you say it again?
Do you think that the Department of Justice should continue to promote the hiring of school resource officers within the COPS hiring program?
I think certainly school resource officers are a very viable and important solution in some places, and I think, again, that is best determined at the state and local level.
Okay, with a little bit of time left, in 2014 Department of Ed report, over 6 million students were chronically absent or missed 10 or more % of school days. And in my state, we have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism by school district in the nation. And unfortunately, that the research shows that the student who is chronically absent is 7 times more likely to drop out of school than their peers who are not. There are reasons. I recently held a roundtable, and there are very important reasons around why it's not just a random student playing hooky, which is what we used to think of it. There are home environments, there are community environments. There are reasons, I think in high school, I think about some of the young men who dropped out. They dropped out because they could go get a better job and they couldn't see the relevance of being in class, right? So there's a lot of issues here. And I've recently introduced the Chronic Absenteeism Reduction Act with Congressman Tim Ryan, which would give the school districts the flexibility to implement strategies that would combat the chronic absenteeism, because it is different per region and what the needs are. My question for you is, how does the department plan to empower the local school districts to address this issue effectively?
Well, thank you for that question. It is a very real issue in many areas, and so often it's a matter of the student and the school not being a good fit for one another, but yet the student doesn't have a choice or another alternative. And I think about a letter that the department recently received from an individual who's in the Correctional facility in Minnesota who really was lamenting the fact that he didn't have the kind of fit that he needed in school. He went down a bad path and ends up in jail or in prison, and now is getting an education. But
With just a little bit of my time left, I agree. Sometimes it is the fit. I totally agree with you. But sometimes there are also extenuating circumstances.
and again, I think it goes back to the local districts and the state that really needs to work together to address the issues at the local level closest to the students that need the support and the help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you again, Dr. Harris.
Certainly welcome. We'll now go to my good friend from California, Ms. Roybal Allard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Secretary DeVos. I want to go back to a topic that was raised by the ranking member, which is how your department treats Title I. Quite frankly, I was disappointed to see your budget request includes focus grants, which is in essence a $1 billion Title I portability proposal. This request for an unauthorized, unproven carve-out from Title I is alarming, especially in light of your request to cut $578 million from other parts of Title I. As you know, Title I portability was soundly rejected by Congress during negotiations for Every Student Succeeds Act. During the debate surrounding ESSA, numerous nonpartisan experts and stakeholders, ranging from the Brookings Institution to the Association of School Superintendents, concluded that portability would result in more funding for wealthier school districts at the expense of poorer districts. My first question is in your view, should high poverty schools receive more funding resources than schools that have lower levels of poverty?
Congresswoman, yes. I think the reality is that they do receive higher levels of funding. And if I could just actually refer back to one of Chairwoman Ranking Member Lowy's questions, or the question around Title I funding and the assumption that Title I funding for vouchers was going to be a part of Title I. It's 1B that is for a voluntary school choice program. It is not any kind of a mandatory or imposed program. I just wanted to make sure to clarify that. And with respect to the funding for Title I, the budget has proposed, and of course, let's make sure we're clear that the budget that we are working from was prior to the omnibus changes in April. So we're working from those funding levels, and the proposal is to carry forward the Title I funding the same as, and to fully fund Title I around support to and through public schools.
Just to be clear, so that you do agree that high poverty schools should receive more federal resources than lower level poverty schools? Was that your testimony?
I think, yes. I mean, I think that is the case.
And, well, as the ranking member said, they don't. But my next question is then, do you accept the basic premise by experts that high poverty schools face disproportionate challenges when compared to moderate income and wealthy schools?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Well, quite frankly, I'm relieved that you do acknowledge that, and then based on your answer, then I find it curious that then you would endorse a proposal that shifts more funding away from highest need schools. So I think there's a conflict there.
We actually are proposing to protect all of the Title I dollars to public schools, and the additional $1 billion is for a voluntary program that would allow students to choose between public schools.
But that money has to come from somewhere, and we can, because of lack of time, we can maybe explore this a little bit further. But any shifts in money, given limited budget, has to come from somewhere, and it appears that it's coming from areas that could truly help these low-income kids and from programs that.
Yes, and the
benefit.
reality is that it is intended to help low-income kids, and it's intended to give some more choices to them and their parents in finding schools that fit for them.
I think where the disagreement comes in is that maybe the intentions are good, but the actual impact is not meeting those intentions. This administration has made clear that restoring local control is a major tenet of its approach to K through 12 education, yet your budget violates that premise. Instead, your request would incentivize districts to adopt portability in spite of warnings that portability would undermine local control in limiting districts from using the funds in ways they believe to be most effective. Has your department considered the financial implications that portability will have on districts, and has the department considered how it would mitigate the disruption a portability structure would impose for public school districts if enacted?
Let me just say again, this is proposed to be a voluntary program, an opt-in on the part of states and local communities. And I would also kind of try to take us back to the notion that we're talking about students and their education, and I think we spend a lot of time talking instead about schools and buildings and systems. I think we should be focused on doing what's right for individual students. And if a school's not working for a student and a parent doesn't have the economic means to do something different, I think we should help find them ways to be able to make that decision on behalf of their students and their children.
Perhaps a better way would be, though, is in these poor minority schools, is maybe to invest more and to bring all the schools up to a level rather than take away from schools that need these funds and putting them into wealthier schools.
Well, and you know, the Federal Department of Education has invested a lot of funds in trying to do just that. In fact, the last administration invested $7 billion in school improvement grants specifically targeted at the lowest performing schools and areas with zero results and zero improvement. So we have tried that. I think it's time to try something different.
Well, the chair is going to gently admonish members, please don't ask the question at the end of your 5 minutes. Puts the secretary in a very difficult spot, and it will inhibit our ability to reach a second round, which I would like to do, second shorter round. So with that, I go to my good friend from Maryland, Dr. Harris, who was kind enough to question so that Ms. Herrera-Butler could ask first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Madam Secretary. It's a pleasure to have you in front of the committee. As you know, every secretary I've questioned in the past few years, I've always made known my preference for giving parents the choice of where to send their students, because in the end, the parents are the taxpayers. The parents are the ones who probably know best. With that, I just want to read a sentence from your testimony. I'm sorry I wasn't here for your testimony, but you said, quote, "In part, my support for educational choice is based on my strong belief in the power of markets and competition as drivers of educational quality and accountability." Let's start with educational quality. I'm sure you're aware that in international testing, the OECD nation tests done, I guess, in 2015 or 2016, in math, reading, and science, we didn't crack the top 10. In fact, we didn't crack the top 15. In fact, in math, we didn't crack the top 25. So I think there is no question that we don't get a bang for our buck in the American educational system because we see education spending going up. We think that, I guess, the measure on how effective education is how much money you spend on it, and yet in all these objective tests, we are failing in a global education economy. And I welcome things like the Opportunity Scholarship Program in D.C. It's interesting because, and I might ask for a brief comment from you on it, because you know they said, well, you know, the latest report is that, well, the people in the children in those schools don't do as well compared to the ones in public schools in the latest one, because of course the study several years ago showed the graduation rate much higher, things like that. One possible explanation is, you know, competition actually works. That actually, when you do give people a choice, that the public school system actually figures they better turn out a better product because now there's competition. So, I mean, is that a reasonable reading of those results?
I think it is indeed, Congressman. I think that the NAEP scores for all of the district and the students in the traditional schools in the district have shown remarkable improvement in the last few years, and I think it's directly relatable to the fact that there are robust choices now within the district for all of the students.
There certainly are. I wish it were more robust, but because the new scholarship awards for school year 2016-2017, as you're probably aware, was only 234 students. Now, interestingly enough, there were 2,349 applications for those 234 slots, a 10-to-1 ratio. So these are parents deciding, 10 times more than slots are available, which actually correlates to what a really good university gets in terms of its applicant to accept, an Ivy League kind of thing. So to somehow suggest that these parents have no idea what they're talking about, and we know better, federal government knows better, is kind of crazy. So I hope you are a strong advocate of the OSP and fully fund it. There are just two other things I wanted to bring up. One is because federal funds do flow directly to institutes of higher education, is this trend that I think is waning now of these higher education institutions that come to the federal government for billions of dollars, declaring themselves sanctuary campuses. So we know we want the billions of dollars, but we're not going to comply with federal immigration authorities. And I hope that you follow the lead of the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, in their budget and write things or request things written into law that suggest that, if you're coming to the federal government for dollars, you better cooperate with our federal immigration, with our federal law enforcement for immigration, because in the end, that's the only immigration enforcement we have at the federal government. State and local governments are not given the authority to write immigration law and have to cooperate with federal authorities, again, if they expect federal largesse. The very last thing I want to bring up, and we'll submit some letters to the question, is that there are Title IX exemptions from religious institutions, I think, before the department, and I don't think action has been taken on these. I will, and I'll submit, QFRs on this. I would hope that the department realizes that the freedom of religion is an important freedom. It's a First Amendment freedom, and that there are legitimate reasons to ask for exemptions from federal regulations, including Title IX, and that the department take action on those. And with that, Mr. Secretary, I'm actually going to yield back the last 20 seconds.
You're an example to the committee. I thank the gentleman. Next, on the basis of order of arrival, we'll go to Mr. Pocan from Wisconsin.
Great. Thank you,
Someone's
Mr.
recognized.
Chairman. I appreciate it. And thank you, Secretary. I've really been looking forward to today. I come from Wisconsin, one of those states that, unfortunately, has had a failed experiment in taxpayer-funded voucher schemes and for-profit charters. And I know that recently you saw there was some research showing that in Indiana and Louisiana, Ohio, Washington, D.C., that students receiving vouchers saw their test scores drop. I think you were asked recently about this, and I know you were on your way out and you didn't have a chance to answer. So I'm glad that today we've got a chance to ask some of these questions. But, my experience in the 14 years I was in the legislature in Wisconsin was during almost the entire growth period of this program. They turn down kids with disabilities, don't get into these programs, left to be in the public schools. They can turn down students who are gay or lesbian within these schools. My rural areas often don't have an alternative for people to go to, so they don't see that. But yet, the one thing I'd really disagree with you, in Wisconsin anyway, those public dollars do go to the private vouchers, so they're losing their money in rural schools to go to this experiment, which hasn't worked. But let me just read you a couple things on the Wisconsin experience, because I know this inside and out. National Public Radio did a story on the Milwaukee voucher program. Quote, over the years, much of the research found test scores flat, lower in some cases, or slightly improved in others. Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, quote, on average, students in Milwaukee's private school voucher program still performed lower than students in the city's traditional public school system. Again, Milwaukee Journal, another article, Right Step Inc., I don't know if you're familiar with that school, a taxpayer-funded voucher school in Milwaukee. They're being sued by parents right now. That their reports indicate that only 7% of their students tested at English language proficiency and 0% in math. So this is our public dollars going to these schools. I just would ask you, would you send your kids to a school where they have 93% of the students aren't English proficient and 0% are math proficient?
Would I? Congressman, thank you for the question, and I'm really glad to hear you're from Wisconsin, and you've had some of the experiences in Wisconsin. I was just recalling the history of the program in Wisconsin.
Since I only have 5 minutes, I
know,
appreciate that, but if we could
I want to
try to
remind
answer it.
you that
Thank you.
Polly Williams, a Democrat city councilwoman, was the one who first introduced the Milwaukee
And who
program.
now says it's not lived
And
up to its
who's no
promise.
longer living.
Right, but before she passed away, I said it does not live up to its
341
promise. You're familiar with
students
that, right?
And now 28,000 students in
She
the
said it didn't live
city
up
of
to the
Milwaukee.
promise of what the creation was. But the question is, would you send your children to a school with 93%
Today,
not proficient in English?
28,000 students in the
Okay,
city of
so
Milwaukee
I guess you're
are
not going to
being
answer
sent
that
there
question
by
either. So
their
let me, if I
parents.
can then, Madam Chair, if I can take my time back, if you're not going to answer the question, let me ask a different question that you might be willing to answer. So the last expansion in Wisconsin of this program, 75% of the kids, the parents who got this money, their kids already attended the school. And 2/3 of the money that went in the tax vouchers to the folks who received this were making more than $100,000. So largely, this is tax policy. This is an education policy. This is making sure people who are already attending these schools. Do you think that your federal program will support this sort of thing? So it's not to encourage new outlets in education. It's simply to give money to people who already attend those schools?
Well, I really applaud Milwaukee for empowering parents to make the decisions that they think are right for their students and their children. And I go back to what I said earlier about the fact that I think we need to shift our
So
conversation.
will the federal program, I guess, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, is under what you're doing, there's 20 programs zeroed out from arts to foreign language, mental health, Special Olympics that are zeroed out under the budget proposal, but you've got new dollars for this failed experiment that I can tell you after 14 years in the legislature, we've had these dismal results. My question is, will the path of this new dollars you're putting in for the federal government go down the failed path in Wisconsin? It's going to people who already attend the schools. So there's nothing new about education. This is tax policy. It should be for the Ways and Means Committee. Is that the intention of the new program expansion that you have?
I know the 28,000 students that are attending schools by the choice of their parents in Milwaukee. That is a success for those students because their
So
parents
are you going
have
to hold
decided.
any accountability?
Their parents
for
have
example,
decided that's the right
yeah.
place for their children.
Madam
to
Secretary,
be.
seriously, you're not answering the question, so let me try one more. I've got 40 seconds. Maybe my trifecta.
Please give her an opportunity to answer the question.
Well, but she's answering a different question that I'm asking, and I guess, at
Please
some point,
allow
I
her
have
to
5
finish her
minutes.
answer.
Sure. So will you have any accountability standards for these schools? So when we first started the program in Wisconsin, money went to someone who started a school who said he could read a book by putting his hand on it, and people bought Cadillacs with the dollars they got in the voucher program. Are you going to have accountability standards in the programs that you're offering new dollars to at the federal level?
Wisconsin and all of the states in the country are putting their ESSA plans together right now. And they are going to decide what kind of flexibility they're going to allow. They have more freedom than ever because of the ESSA legislation to be creative and innovative. And our conversation needs to shift from talking about schools and buildings and institutions to what is right for individual students.
So I tried. I gave you 20 seconds. Will you have accountability standards was the question.
There are accountability standards. The states are required to have
Are
accountability standards.
you going to with the federal dollars was the question.
That is part of the ESSA
Accountability
legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a second round. Thank you.
Absolutely. We now go to, I think, a member that's probably not a stranger to you, Madam Secretary, Mr. Molinar from
not.
Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary DeVos, thank you for being here with us today. And I also want to thank you just for stepping up and being a leader for our kids and education in our country at this important time. And from your message today, I think it's an important message of trusting parents, trusting our local and state educators, and really keeping the focus on kids and what's best for them. So I very much appreciate that message. I wanted to bring up a specific topic to you that I had a recent listening session at Central Michigan University, and students in my district came forward with concerns regarding the rise of campus sexual assault across the nation. And it's been recently been reported that 1 in 5 women and over 10% of the student population will be a victim of sexual assault. My understanding is you recently met with the First Lady of Michigan, who has recently unveiled a program to combat this growing issue by creating a campus sexual assault work group called Let's End Campus Sexual Assault. I guess what I'm wondering is there a role for the federal government in this meeting this challenge, and I appreciate the fact that you're working with state officials and addressing this concern. And I promised the student who asked me this question that I would ask you directly in a hearing. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Congressman. It's great to see you. And let me just say I share the concern that you and many others have about the rise in this issue on campuses, as well as many other issues on campuses. But the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education is very committed to investigating complaints that reach the Office of the Civil Rights, and we are invested in fully funding OCR. I know that there are a number of viewpoints on how the rules surrounding this have been implemented, and we are looking at those very closely. I've been meeting with a number of stakeholders, including First Lady Snyder from Michigan, and we take this issue very seriously. It is certainly an issue for the Office of Civil Rights to be engaged with, and for the Department of Education to grapple with, but we are not at a point where we can communicate any change in direction or any new information at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and I would like to keep in contact with you on that. And I know
welcome that
the students across the country are that's a concern. And another area that's a concern, in fact, I've heard recently is today from business leaders about the need for skilled labor and career and technical education is a huge priority, and the opportunity for jobs in this area in the future. And I know there are different ideas. The federal government has a role, and I appreciated your year-round Pell Grant statement. Are there partnerships or things that we can be doing at the federal level to encourage career and technical education, and what thoughts do you have on that?
Well, this clearly is an area that is of great focus on behalf of the President and this administration. And I've had the privilege and opportunity to visit 3 different community colleges since I've been in this job, and all of them taking a really unique approach to partnering with local businesses that have great needs for skilled workers and skilled trades, and really very high-skilled, high-paying jobs. I think that the way we can best support it is to in a very targeted manner, focus the dollars to help support community colleges in this pursuit, community colleges and other institutions of higher learning. I think we've done our young people a disservice over the last few decades by suggesting that a 4-year college or university is the only way you can really be a success in life, and that we have to have a much broader conversation around multiple pathways and multiple options for higher education, including layered credentialing and some of these programs that are being implemented at the community college level that are really meeting immediate needs. Students are getting the training and education that they need and into a very well-paying job, can go back again a year or 2 or 3 later and get additional credentialing. We have many, many jobs going unfilled in this country today that could be filled and addressed if there's that partnership. Again, it comes down to really a local level partnership with businesses and their needs. Saw an amazing program in Salt Lake City, one in the Orlando area, and another one in Miami, all meeting very different needs for very different directions, but many of them STEM focused, and that was a common theme. And so I think that another area that we can play a role is to really highlight some of the best practices and some of the successes that are happening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We next go to the gentlelady from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being with us today. First, a quick question from home. We have 4,500 Massachusetts students who attended the now defunct American Career Institute. On January 18th, your department told them that their loans would be forgiven. It should be completed between 90 and 120 days. We are past the 120-day Parents are Massachusetts Attorney General. Students are not getting a response from your department. Can you reaffirm that you're moving forward with this loan forgiveness?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Indeed, those to whom we've made a commitment, we are going to make good on that commitment, and that is in process. With regard to that regulation, that is something that we are studying carefully and looking at, and we will have something further to say on that within the next few weeks.
Great, and it would be very helpful if you would get back to our Attorney General and give some reassurance to our students. I want to go back to the discussion you were having with my colleague from Wisconsin. You were recently in Indiana, where you called opponents of school choice flat earthers. And I assume that you mean by that a flat earther is someone who doesn't look at evidence, doesn't look at data, isn't willing to embrace innovation, creativity, just keeps believing what they always believe. But we've had some major studies in, as you're proposing a $250 million increase in pilots that would include vouchers for private schools. The studies from Louisiana, from Indiana, from Ohio, all show that students who choose private schools in voucher programs have experienced, quote, significant losses in achievement. And the studies also show that if we want to achieve good outcomes for students, those come through nonprofit schools that are open to all and are accountable to state and or federal authorities. You've talked a lot about the flexibility of states as being preeminent. So I want to go back to Indiana, to Bloomington in particular, and look at the Lighthouse Christian Academy. The Lighthouse Christian Academy currently receives over $665,000 in state vouchers for students to attend their school. They are also clear in their handbook and their guidance that if you are from a family where there is homosexual or bisexual activity, their word, not mine, or practicing alternate gender identity, you may be denied admissions. If this school, which obviously is approved to discriminate against LGBT students in Indiana, if Indiana applies for this federal funding, will you stand up that this school be open to all students?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for your question with regard broadly to school choice. And
it's actually kind of narrow because I have 1 minute left.
And I would like to refer back to your question about the comment about those
I'm
who
sure
are
you would.
resistant
I
to
want
change.
to ask particularly, is there a line for you on state flexibility? You are the backstop for students in their right to access a quality education. Would you, in this case, say, we are going to overrule and you cannot discriminate, whether it be on sexual orientation, race, special needs, in our voucher programs? Will that be a guarantee from you for our students?
For states who have programs that allow for parents to make choices, they set up the rules around that.
So that's a
And
no.
that-
Do
and
you
that
see
is-
any circumstance where the Federal Department of Education, under your leadership, would say that a school was not qualified? What if they said, we are not accepting African American students, but that was okay with the state? Does the state trump? Do you see any situation where you would step in?
Well, again, I think the Office of Civil Rights and our Title IX protections are broadly applicable across the board. But when it comes to parents making choices on behalf of their students...
This isn't about parents making choices. This is about use of federal dollars. Is there any situation, would you say to Indiana, that school cannot discriminate against LGBT students if you want to receive federal dollars? Or would you say the state has the flexibility in this situation?
I believe
Yes
states
or no?
continue to have flexibility in putting together their programs. Just
so
as
if I
they have
understand
all-
your testimony, I want to make sure I get this right. There's no situation of discrimination or exclusion that if a state approved it for its voucher program, that you would step in and say, that's not how we're going to use our federal dollars. There's no situation if the state approved it that you would put the state flexibility over our students. Is that your testimony?
I think a hypothetical in this case is
It's not a
appropriate.
hypothetical. This is a real school applying for,
Lady,
that receives
lady's
dollars.
time has expired, but I'm going to allow the secretary to answer.
I go back to the bottom line is we believe that parents are the best equipped to make choices for their children's schooling and education decisions, and too many children today are trapped in schools that don't work for them. We have to do something different. We have to do something different than continuing a top-down, one-size-fits-all approach. And that is the focus, and states and local communities are best equipped to make these decisions and frameworks on behalf of their
I am shocked that you cannot come up with one example of discrimination that you would stand up for students.
Not required to answer. Go now to the gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I had to step out and finish a hearing over on the other side, but we've got hearings going on all over the place here. You mentioned, I'm a big supporter of TRIO, just like you are in your comments, that in your answer, I think, to Senator Collins during your confirmation, as the chairman is, I think most members of this program are, and as you said, you dropped the McNair and EOC programs because you thought they were outside of the congressional intent of what we had planned for TRIO. If we fund those programs, would they then be within congressional intent?
If that's how you defined it, I guess they would be. I'm giving you the rationale for what we've proposed in the budget, and we believe those programs fall outside of the scope. And again, we've made some tough choices and decisions with presenting our appeal for the budget.
And and I understand that, and we'll have those discussions, and there are always differences between what any administration proposes and what Congress wants to do. Those are fairly I think, well-supported programs within Congress, and you'll probably see funding in there. In the FY17 omnibus appropriations legislation, the subcommittee included a directive that encouraged you to use your discretion as the secretary to review and score more than 77 applications to the Upward Bound program that were rejected for minor formatting issues like failure to double-space and typographical errors in the budget narrative. Would you please update the subcommittee on your department's actions in response to that directive, and also please outline what steps the department will take to provide the opportunity for the rejected grant applications to be considered for funding?
Thanks for that question, Congressman. As you know, this grant application process was under the purview of the previous administration. The process was opened and closed prior to my coming into the job, and because it was when we found out about the issue with regard to formatting errors, it was after the competition had closed, and we looked at all viable legal remedies to try to address it and did not find any. Since then, you have seen fit to appropriate $50 million, and going back and looking at it again, we believe that that has materially changed our available options. And so we are going to use those funds, the $50 million, to reconsider those applications that were considered not viable because of the formatting errors. And so that is going to be our remedy. But let me just say that this issue apparently has been going on through 4 different secretaries unaddressed. The moment I found out about it, I issued a department-wide policy indicating that we are not going to reject applications for any competitive bid process based on formatting, that this is a bureaucratic requirement that we should be rid of now, and we are. So anything going forward from here will not be held to those same formatting requirements. But with regard to this issue, which if you had any idea how much time it has chewed up internally for us, you would be amazed. But we have, because of that material change with the new appropriation, have found a way to be able to address that particular issue.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Your budget also puts $1.2 billion in for federal impact aid, which is a $67 million cut below impact aid payments currently for federal property in states like Idaho, and in fact states across the country that have federal facilities that impact school districts. What's your justification for the cuts in the impact aid program?
So the portion of the impact aid program that we've proposed to eliminate is one that is not tied to any students at all. And so there are no students being supported in that particular federal land area. And since those locales have had about 40 years to consider this, we thought it might be appropriate that they could have figured it out by now.
Okay. I appreciate that answer. That'll be interesting to look at. Anyway, thank you for being here today. I appreciate your testimony and look forward to working with you.
Thanks, Congressman.
You're right, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. We now move to my good friend from California, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce LaTrenda Leslie, who's our foster youth shadow from Oakland, California. LaTrenda, her oldest daughter, will be starting. She'll be starting kindergarten this fall, and so as we deliberate today, let us keep in mind the young families who will be affected by our decisions. And I'm really, Madam Secretary, good to see you, kind of hurt, quite frankly, that she heard your response to Congresswoman Clark's question with regard to discrimination against students. It's been the federal government that allowed me to go to school, okay? And so when you say that it's up to the parents and local communities, even if young people are being discriminated against, that it's the parents and schools, and to take the federal government's responsibility out of that is just appalling and sad. I see in your budget, it reflects exactly what you said. You're cutting $1.7 million from the Office of Civil Rights. To me, it's outrageous. And again, I have to go back to your statement when you said that HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, are real pioneers when it comes to school choice, which completely ignores the fact that for many black students, HBCUs were their only choice. For too long, black students weren't allowed to enroll in predominantly white institutions, even at public schools in their own states. I could not go to public school, Madam Secretary. And so for you to sit here and say, as our secretary, that it's okay if parents and local communities can discriminate, it's very sad, shocking, and disappointing. Now, I see in your budget, you say that HBCUs, the president said HBCUs are critical for black students, but I don't think you really mean that, because you don't increase the funding for HBCUs and you actually zero out the strengthening master's degree programs that we funded in fiscal 17, which is extremely important for HBCUs. And so I'm wondering why are you doing that? What's that about, and why would you do that? As well as, and I just have to say, cut so many programs, 24 programs that minority students and low-income students rely on. 21st Century Community Learning Centers, that's after-school programs for low-income students. You're zeroing out American history and civic academics. You're leveling out preschool development grants. I mean, not leveling, you're cutting them, you're eliminating them. You're eliminating Special Olympics, $12.6 million. You're just wiping out Special Olympics for disabled students. For the life of me, I got to understand what your thinking is about this budget and low-income students, vulnerable students, minority students, students who really deserve a shot at a good quality public education.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Lot of questions or a lot of issues there.
Well, they're all
wrapped
around this budget and reflection of what you see as being our
Okay, let me just
values.
start by saying I want to be very clear. I am not in any way suggesting that students should not be protected and not be in a safe and secure and nurturing learning environment. They all should have that opportunity. And I have continued to talk about that need for all students to have a safe and secure and nurturing learning environment. And
That's not the issue.
The department is going to continue and will continue to investigate any complaints or any issues surrounding, allegations of discrimination. We have no proposal to change any of that. So as we talk about states assuming more authority and flexibility in their in their, how they implement their programs for their students, nothing about that changes our desire to ensure that students have a safe and secure and nurturing learning environment.
Madam
with
Secretary,
respect,
referring to
with respect to your
Congresswoman
question around
Clark's.
HBCUs.
Well, can you answer her question real
Well,
quick, very quickly?
I'd rather talk about the HBCUs and how our continued commitment to HBCUs by continuing to fully fund at previous levels. And
I don't think that's what the HBCUs have requested. In fact, they need to see a small increase in their funding to make sure that black students have those educational opportunities. And then the cut in the master's program is just wiping out. You're eliminating that for the most part with HBCUs. So it's eliminated.
It's a new program that hasn't been part of this budget. So it's not eliminated because it hasn't been funded yet.
Wait just a minute. We did fund that at at $7.5 million. The Strengthening Master's Degree Program. And you're eliminating that.
We are working from the budget numbers that were available to us prior to your omnibus in April. That was just a few weeks ago.
So you're not eliminating it, or you are eliminating it?
No.
You're not?
The figures in the budget that we're working from were all put together prior to the omnibus legislation.
Okay, so you're going to restore the $7.5 million in the Strengthening Master's Degree Program?
Well, I think that is going to be up to Congress to decide how to handle that anomaly.
Yeah.
So you're cutting it?
Well, to be fair, let the chair interject here, and with all due respect, gentlelady's time's up, but I'll certainly allow her to respond. I pointed this out at the beginning. This is simply a case where Congress said, we were pretty late getting our omnibus done. That's on our fault. Frankly, they had gone ahead and developed their budget, so they didn't have the guidance there. So we'll have to revisit that ourselves, and I suspect the gentlelady will probably be pretty pleased with the decision that gets made depending on the allocation. But again, in fairness to the Secretary, they didn't have that information, and they did not know Congress had authorized that program at the time they were putting together their budget. So it puts her in a difficult spot here, and nobody's fault, but it's just we have sort of overlapping documents here, and it creates some discrepancies on occasion.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for clarifying that, so I expect to see the $7.5 million restored.
I have a great deal of respect for my good friend from California, and I always listen to the points she makes, and a lot of these decisions will depend on what our allocation is, which we don't know, but I think the gentlelady knows we've worked together on a variety of these issues before, and look forward to continuing that.
I hope we can restore some of these programs that they've eliminated also.
Absolutely. With that, we'll go to Mr. Womack, Distinguished Vice Chairman of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a great discussion. Madam Secretary, welcome. And it hasn't been said since I've been here, but probably deserves to be said. We are beginning to see the early stages of a much-needed, robust discussion about how we begin the process of getting our federal budget under control. And the inescapable fact that many of the programs that we're talking about here are on the discretionary side of the budget, and it is being squeezed by runaway entitlement programs and the inability to address those, which becomes a very difficult political problem for the Congress. I understand that, but it's the truth. And I'm sad that we haven't taken up that particular discussion, but we'll save that for another day. Pretty good discussion with my friend from Michigan on career and technical education, and that's where I want to focus my question with you. The response that you gave, Mr. Molinar, was geared toward what we should be doing with our community colleges. But you had just made a statement that I completely agree with about what we have suggested to previous generations about a pathway to success, that pathway has to be through a college degree. I am of the strong opinion, based on my travels in my district and in my conversations with my job creators, that a lot of the really good opportunities out there exist today for young people who could leave high school, maybe not even without darkening the doors of a college environment, and go right to work with proper training and proper skills and proper certifications, right to work with really good paying jobs, a fulfilling opportunity at a great career, and emerging technologies. And so I believe in my heart that a lot of this training should be happening long before the decision is made to go or not to go to college. I have in my mind that that's probably somewhere in that late junior high stage based on aptitude. But so I'm going to ask you, where is that time in a young person's educational life, given the tremendous demand for jobs today, skills today that a lot of our graduates do not possess? Is this something that we should be doing in our high school curriculums?
Thank you, Congressman. The whole area of career and career preparedness and understanding the wide range of options that one has is, I think, an area that definitely needs a lot more discussion and a lot more energy around it. Today, a lot of the funding for things that support these efforts are kind of bifurcated. Many of them, in the Labor Committee or the Labor Department, and some in the Department of Education. But the notion that there are many, many different opportunities for students beyond high school is not really addressed at an early enough age. And I think I agree with you that a couple of the places that I visited that have really great dual enrollment programs have started to address this, but I think there is an opportunity to have young people exposed to some of these opportunities much earlier. And apprenticeships and internships, we should be talking about how to encourage and support the growth of these in a major way. I had opportunity to visit a really unique high school yesterday, one of the Cristo Rey schools. I don't know if you've heard about this, but these are Catholic high schools that as a way to help support and fund the operations of the school, the students actually go to work in a business one day a week, and through doing so, gain a whole lot of personal experience and confidence, but also help to support their education. And they come out of high school really with a much broader understanding of the professional world, the work world, and options and opportunities they have. Those kinds of unique and innovative approaches to exposing young people to a wide range of possibilities early on are things we should be encouraging. And I go back to this notion that, again, states and local communities are best equipped to try these things. They are the best laboratories of democracy, and we should be highlighting those that are working well and encouraging others to emulate them.
Yeah, we may choose to agree or disagree on certain matters regarding budgets, but on that particular subject, we are in total agreement. And I yield back my time.
I thank the gentleman, and just for informational purposes, for my friend and for the secretary, we would love to have you visit Oklahoma, where we actually do have a great interlocking career tech and high school system where young people literally in late junior high, early high school go back and forth and get exposed to technical kinds of career that may be more appropriate for them. But Ohio has a similar system, and I think we're two unique systems in the country, and it's well worth coming to see if you ever have an opportunity. We'd invite you both. With that, I want to go to my good friend from Tennessee who's had to shuffle back and forth and do a lot of hearing. Mr. Fleischman, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Secretary. It's a privilege to have you here before us today. I represent the people of the great 3rd District of Tennessee, that's Chattanooga and Oak Ridge, and as the chairman alluded to, I was over at the Energy and Water Subcommittee this morning, so I was a bit delayed. First of all, I would like to mention how impressed I was with the emphasis that you placed on school choice. I think it's absolutely imperative that we give parents the options they need to ensure their children are properly prepared for the future, so I thank you for that position. I was also especially impressed with the building evidence around innovation section of the budget. I think we really need investment in research activities that will allow school districts to identify what works and what doesn't. On an area of concern, as you may know, I am an advocate and I view myself as a champion for computer science education, computer science literacy, and I think there's tremendous bipartisan support for this endeavor. I was a little concerned about the Department's proposed cuts to Title IV Part A grants authorized under ESSA. In last year's appropriations bill, we worked hard to ensure that states would be able to use some of this money for computer science education. There are 500,000 computing jobs currently unfulfilled in the United States. However, our country only graduated and sent into the workforce 42,969 computer science specialists last year. It's estimated that between 2016 and 2020, it's projected that there will be 960,000 job openings in computer science if current graduation patterns continue. Only 344,000 graduates will fill them. So my question is, do you agree with me and my colleagues from both sides of the aisle that we need partnerships with the private sector, which is looking to hire Americans for computer science jobs, and schools from kindergarten through high school to help ensure students from all walks of life are prepared for the computer science jobs that need to be filled now and in the future? And if so, how can we work to ensure that we prepare students for these jobs? Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. I definitely share your interest in ensuring that students have exposure to STEM subjects and, in fact, have opportunity to pursue really robust programs in that area. I would just, as an anecdote, refer to a high school that my husband started, a charter high school focused on aviation that has a very distinct STEM focus and has been really doing an amazing job of attracting kids that would have not been likely to be a part of a high school like that. But with regard to specifics in the budget, this budget, again, was developed before the continuing resolution was addressed, but we do have a $20 million experimental grant in for STEM competition, and I think that's a good place and good role for the department. I think an important place for the focus to be placed around STEM is really, again, at the state level, because they are putting the ESSA plans together. They have the opportunity to really customize it for the students in their states and their local communities. And I had an interesting conversation I think it was last week, with a number of superintendents from one from a rural district, one from a very large urban area, another from a kind of a medium-sized city, and then the other one was actually a statewide superintendent, how they have implemented coding programs in their districts. And I believe the organization that they've partnered with on that has now entered 20% of the school districts in the country. I think we need to continue to encourage that. I hesitate to say we should mandate it from the federal level, but we should try to actually encourage and support those activities as states are putting their plans together.
Well, Madam Secretary, I thank you, and I agree with you. I have engaged in some of those coding opportunities in the schools, particularly in some of our inner city schools in Chattanooga, which have been traditionally underserved, and it was inspiring to go there and see high school students all the way down to second graders engaging in coding. And I just look forward to working with you on this computer science literacy and with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle as we reach out to all-American students in this regard. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now move to my good friend from Alabama, Ms. Roby.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being with us today. It's good to see you again. I'm really looking forward to working with you and your department through the oversight of this committee. And let me say thank you for your service to our country. I want to convey my appreciation on behalf of all of the students and parents and educators in the state of Alabama. It was about a year ago when your predecessor was here and sitting right where you are now, and we had a good exchange about the role of the federal government in decisions concerning standards and curriculum for the classroom. So let me back up for a minute and just give you some background on my involvement in this issue. Back in 2013, I introduced a bill called the Defending State Authority Over Education Act, that prohibited the federal government from making special funding grants and coveted regulation waivers contingent upon whether a state is using certain curriculum or assessment policies. For 3 years, we worked to get this language included in the comprehensive rewrite of No Child Left Behind, which is now the law, ESSA-ESSA. Thankfully, we finally succeeded, and our strong state authority language was included in the Every Student Succeeds Act. So back to my exchange with your predecessor, which was taking place during the very critical implementation process of ESSA. What I was trying to get a straight answer on then was whether the officials within the Department of Education would simply ignore the law and continue their old habit of exercising undue and inappropriate influence over state education decisions. You have to remember that kind of thing was commonplace under the previous administration. And I believe that the former Secretary King and I got to a good place, but I think we can get to an even better one today. So let me ask you, Madam Secretary, number one, do you acknowledge that the law now expressly forbids the coercion of states to adopt certain education standards and curriculum, including Common Core?
Absolutely.
And will the department follow the letter and spirit of the law?
Absolutely, it will.
I appreciate that answer. And so, to be clear, you can definitely count on me among those who believe that my state of Alabama and all states should indeed set high standards that challenge students and build critical thinking skills. I'm glad that our state has made an effort to raise its standard in recent years when we lagged behind for so long. And I certainly welcome collaboration with other states to share best practices. However, the intrusion of the federal government into that process, directly or indirectly, is inappropriate, and it invariably comes with a political agenda from Washington. This has bred a lot of confusion and distrust, and in many states it has contributed to a volatile policy environment. And so I appreciate your commitment and your forthrightness on this issue, and any other comments that you want to make about this, I'm welcome to hear.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. We share that concern, and you have my commitment that the department is going to implement and follow the law that you have set out through ESSA. I would frankly love to see a competition on the part of all the states to outdo one another on how high they set their standards and how high they shoot. We should be shooting for excellence across the board, but in no way should it be a top-down, one-size-fits-all solution from the federal government. And my hope is that with the state's flexibility and opportunities here, that they do indeed shoot high, and they're very ready to point out to others when they're not, living up to the task of preparing. I'd love to see a competition on the part of all the states to outdo one another on how high they set their standards and how high they shoot. We should be shooting for excellence across the board, but in no way should it be a top-down, one-size-fits-all solution from the federal government. And my hope is that with the state's flexibility and opportunities here, that they do indeed shoot high, and they're very ready to point out to others when they're not, living up to the task of preparing all of our students for a great future.
Thank you so much for your commitment. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady, another model of turning back time. I appreciate it. I know the Secretary has a hard stop at 1, so we're not going to be able to do a second round. I regret that, but we had both the ranking member and the full chairman here, and I think we all stretched our time a little bit beyond 5 minutes anyway. But I do want to allow my good friend, the ranking member, to make any comment or closing statement or question she cares to, and then I'll do the same.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you, Madam Secretary. Let me just try to correct the record in some instances here with my time. I think it's wonderful that we talk about career and technical education. You may have seen the Pew Research Center and Markle Foundation's The State of American Jobs, which talked about 70% of American adults do not have a 4-year degree. And while we can talk about it and give a lot of lip service to it, the fact of the matter is, and this was not a continuing resolution issue, there was a decision made for this budget to cut the career and technical education program by 15%, $168 million. This is not, and you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. You're either going to put the money where we believe we're going to make the best possible bang for the buck, or we should just be silent about it. Don't talk about it and do something about it. Let me talk about vouchers for a moment. Gold Standard, Institute of Education Sciences, Gold Standard Evaluation of Washington, D.C., the only federally funded voucher program, found that vouchers negatively impacted student achievement. D.C. students using vouchers performed significantly worse on math in the first year they used the voucher. In the early grades, they performed worse in both math and reading. Similar results from Louisiana, Ohio, and Indiana, as my colleagues have pointed out. Madam Secretary, you continue to say that Title I has not been cut. Title I has been cut by $578 million. The fact of the matter is that with all due respect, on May 5th, we signed an omnibus bill. I don't want any process piece here, and that affects what my colleague Ms. Lee talked about. These are cuts to programs. So the fact is that the budget proposes cuts that, if enacted, would impose real harm on our country's students. And I have to make the point again with regard to vouchers and children who are disabled or disabilities. You referenced the McKay Scholarship Program, and I would just tell you that in that program, with information that I have, and we looked into it, no due process rights under IDEA. They give up due process rights granted by the individuals if you accept a federal voucher. No accountability for the participating schools. They do not have to be accredited. They do not have to provide any evidence of the quality of their programs. No evidence of student success because students do not take standardized tests in private schools. It's impossible to hold private schools accountable or compare their performance with public schools. Key NAEP scores have declined or flat between 2009 and 2015. Now, I make those corrections because if we are going to have a robust conversation about education, then let's put the facts on the table and go from there. This is a budget, and I characterized it, Mr. Chairman, in the Ag Appropriations Committee this morning. It is cruel, it is inhumane, and it is heartless. A $9.2 billion cut to education. And the fact of the matter is that when my colleague talked about, there's 10%, there's less money going to high poverty areas. The teachers are more likely to be novices in these places. Those underserved areas are going to be hurt. We're none of us in here going to be hurt. We're going to be fine. Our kids and our grandkids are going to be okay. But millions of kids around this country are going to suffer what has been done with a $9.2 billion cut to our education programs, which is supposed to serve our youngsters, make sure they have a good future and a bright future. And I'm going to fight this budget, Mr. Chairman, with every fiber of my body, because it is wrong to do this to our kids.
I have no doubt. Madam Secretary, I just want to thank you very much for being here today. I want to thank you for your testimony, for your professionalism. I particularly love the emphasis on choice and, frankly, trying to give as many options to young people as we possibly can, and you certainly laid that out robustly in your budget. I know you've had to make some tough decisions. We actually have three cabinet-level jurisdictions here, and we're given an allocation, and we end up having to make a lot of tough decisions too. So we certainly have a great deal of sympathy for that. And I want to assure you, see, this is a committee that is a pretty spirited committee, and we appreciate you engaging with us today. We look forward for other opportunities to do that, and I know every member of this committee on a bipartisan basis, if they can assist you in any way, want to do that. We want to see you succeed because we think your success represents the success of America's students. We know you care about that deeply. You've demonstrated that over a lifetime. We know the President cares about that, and we look forward to working with you in that common endeavor as we go forward. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary.
All right, everyone.